Hi, 8th graders. We're going to look at some big idea takeaways from all of this center of rotation or rotation about a point sort of ideas. So we have, in this case, I have two shapes that we can see. Here is our pre-image, here's our image, so we can see that this one is the copy because it has all the primes, and we can see our center of rotation and that sort of thing. So let's look at a few big ideas with this. This was a 90 degrees counterclockwise rotation, so I was rotating it in this general direction. I was rotating in this direction for this particular shape, or for this particular transformation. A few things that we can say about this transformation is if I were to look at this center of rotation and if I were to look at one point versus its corresponding point, one thing that we can say about those things is they're going to be the same distance away. So if I were to look at this distance from the center of rotation to point B, looks like I'm at about half a centimeter. Center of rotation to B prime should be about, or pretty much exactly the same. Yeah, see? Half a centimeter. That's really important. This means that if I were to continue this rotation of this point around, it would essentially, if I had what's called a compass with me, I could show you that this point would travel around and create like a circle with its traveling. This point and at every corresponding point that it has, 360 degrees around, would create a circle in its travels. If I looked at point C versus the center of rotation, it would be the same thing. So C to C prime to C double prime and all of the other points for C, they would travel around and I would have I would have another circle. These circles within a circle, within a circle, within a circle for every single one of these points on this whole line. And I could even look at this midpoint of BC versus the midpoint of B prime, C prime. And even this is going to be the same distance every single time I do the rotation for every other BC midpoint that this shape goes around. And it would create, yet again, a circle at that midpoint for every single one of the rotations that I could possibly ever do. So essentially what we have is what's called concentric circles. These circles, like identifying each and every point along this shape, is like every single one of these points will always lie at the same distance away from the center of rotation, and we create circles within circles. Concentric circles, that's what essentially it is. So every single corresponding point on a shape or its various images are always the same distance away from the center of rotation. So point B versus its corresponding point B prime is going to be the same distance away from the center of rotation. Same with A versus A prime. It is the same distance away as it is from the center of rotation. Now what I am not saying is that B is the same distance away from the center of rotation as, say, for example, A prime, because B and A prime are not corresponding points, but B and B prime are. So these 2 points are the same distance away from the center of rotation. These 2 points are the same distance away from the center of rotation. All right. As well, what we can also say is as we do this rotation, every single one of the angles that we have here, from like angle A versus A prime, these angles will all remain the same. So all corresponding angles will remain congruent. So this angle A is a 90-degree angle. So I could have technically drawn it with that little square. Angle A prime should also be perfect. A 90-degree angle. It's hard to see. Sorry, I have a weird cup there making my phone be high. And so that is also at a 90-degree angle. So these angles are congruent. They're both 90 degrees. And I could say the same thing about angle F and F prime, D and D prime. Those are all going to be congruent angles. They will all be the same measure as they were with the original shape, or every angle on the image will be the same as its corresponding angle on the original shape on the pre-image. Last but not least, every single line, if I were to take corresponding lines, so AB, if I were to take this line and draw it so it's sort of more continuous, so if I were to continue it out versus its corresponding angle over here, or corresponding side over here, they are always going to meet at that same degree as I rotated it. So every single one of these, so there's 90 degrees with that one. If I were to do the same thing with, for example, EF here, extend this out, and same thing with E prime, F prime up here. I'm going to extend this out. If I look at where these two angles meet, they will always be these two side lengths. If I extended them out, look at that, 90 degrees. Isn't that so cool? So every single one of these, if I were to extend out D prime E prime versus DE and actually look at those and where they meet, they would meet at a 90-degree angle. So I'm not even just moving this shape 90 degrees, but I'm essentially moving every single one of these new side lengths all over 90 degrees to, one, keep the image congruent to the original pre-image, but also every single one of these lines meets at that 90-degree angle. So that's kind of a cool big takeaway that you can have from this center of rotation. Same sort of thing is happening with the same sort of shape here. This one is keeping one fixed point. So if your center of rotation is actually on the shape, that's the only point that is not going to move. So A versus A prime, that point isn't ever going to move regardless of how much I rotate. This shape around is always going to stay here, that A versus A prime point. Every other one of these points is going to create a concentric circle. So from B to B prime, I could continue that around and I'd have a concentric circle. C to C prime, same thing. I could continue that around and I'd have a concentric circle that goes through C and C prime and goes through every other C point if I were to continue this rotation around. Kind of fun. It's super fun. I hope these were fun to look at, and I hope this sort of drives home some really neat points for you in your brain in regards to rotations. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Bye.